What is the most dangerous thing you can buy with a single click? Most people would say a weapon, or perhaps something illegal off the dark web. But the truth is far more unsettling. The most dangerous things are often hidden in plain sight, listed under antiques or curiosities, masquerading as harmless pieces of history. They wait patiently on auction sites, carrying with them a darkness you could never imagine. And they are sold to the highest bidder, with no warnings that can truly prepare you for what comes next. Our story begins not in a crumbling Gothic mansion or an ancient, fog-shrouded cemetery, but in the sterile, blue and white glow of an eBay listing. The year was 2003, and Kevin Mannies, a small antiques shop owner, listed a peculiar item. A small, unassuming wooden wine cabinet. The description was not a sales pitch. It was a desperate warning. He wrote that he had bought it at an estate sale of a 103-year-old woman, and that her granddaughter had begged him to take it, explaining that her grandmother had always called it the Dybbuk Box and insisted it must never, ever be opened. The box, she had explained, contained a Dybbuk, a restless, malicious spirit from Jewish folklore that was believed to be the dislocated soul of a dead person. This particular spirit had been captured and imprisoned within the wine cabinet. The grandmother, a Holocaust survivor, had brought it with her when she immigrated to the United States. It was her most terrifying secret and her most burdensome possession. She kept it hidden, a silent, wooden warden for an ancient evil, and had passed on her terror to her family, who now wanted nothing more than to be rid of it. Mannies, a skeptic by trade, was intrigued by the story, but not a believer. He took the box back to his workshop. He decided to clean and restore it as a gift for his mother. But as soon as he presented it to her, she suffered a massive stroke, leaving her partially blind and unable to speak. In her hospital room, she tearfully spelled out 2 words for him using her finger: hate gift. Terrified by the coincidence, Mannies tried to give the box to friends and family, but it was always returned within days, accompanied by stories of dread, nightmares, and a feeling of being watched. Finally, Mannies himself succumbed to the box's influence. He began to suffer from the same horrifying nightmare every single night, a recurring vision of being beaten and tormented by a demonic old hag. He would wake up with mysterious bruises on his body. He was plagued by a constant smell of cat urine and jasmine flowers that had no source. He would see terrifying shadow figures darting in the corners of his vision. Broken and terrified, he realized he couldn't keep it. He couldn't destroy it. His only option was to list it on eBay, hoping someone else would take the burden. This is where a young man named Alex, a college student and amateur historian, enters our story. Alex ran a small blog dedicated to objects with unique histories, and when he stumbled upon the now infamous eBay listing for the haunted Dybbuk Box, he saw not a threat, but the ultimate story. He read the seller's harrowing account with academic fascination, dismissing the supernatural claims as a fantastic piece of modern folklore. He saw the box as a cultural artifact, a tangible piece of a ghost story, and he knew he had to have it for his collection. Alex placed a bid, half expecting to be outdone by another paranormal enthusiast. To his surprise, he won the auction for a relatively small sum. A few days later, a carefully wrapped package arrived. As he unboxed it, he felt a strange, static charge in the air. The box itself was smaller than he'd imagined, simple and unadorned, made of dark wood. It had no visible lock, but was sealed shut. It was strangely cold to the touch, and a faint, musty odor emanated from it, the smell of old wine, dried flowers, and something else, something vaguely metallic and unpleasant. Respecting the rules of the legend for the sake of authenticity for his blog, Alex decided he would not open the box. He placed it on a high shelf in his small apartment living room, a trophy of folklore. That very first night, the disturbances began. It started subtly. He was woken at exactly 3:15 a.m. by the distinct smell of jasmine. It was so powerful, it was almost suffocating. He searched his apartment, but there was no source. As he tried to fall back asleep, he had the unshakable feeling that he was not alone, that a pair of unseen eyes were watching him from the corner of his room. The next night, the nightmare started. He dreamt of an old, decrepit woman with sunken, black eyes and skin like wrinkled parchment. She would stand over his bed, her mouth open in a silent scream, her long, bony fingers reaching for his throat. He would wake up gasping for air, his heart pounding, the sheets soaked in a cold sweat. The dream was so vivid, so real, that the feeling of dread followed him throughout the day. He tried to brush it off as stress from his midterm exams, but the nightmare returned the following night, and the night after that. Soon, physical phenomena began to plague his apartment. Light bulbs would flicker and burn out the moment he entered a room. The television would turn on by itself, always to a channel of pure static. He would leave a room and come back to find cabinet doors wide open, or a book inexplicably on the floor. He tried to rationalize each event: faulty wiring, a faulty remote, a draft. But the events grew more frequent, more impossible to explain away. The feeling of being watched became a constant, oppressive companion. One evening, his girlfriend Maya came over to study. She knew nothing of the box or its story. Within minutes of arriving, she complained of a splitting headache and a sudden wave of profound sadness. As she sat on the couch, her eyes went wide. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. She pointed to the hallway. "I just saw a shadow. It looked like a hunched-over old woman." Alex's blood ran cold. It was the first external validation of what he had been experiencing. It wasn't just in his head. It was real. The activity escalated dramatically, with a witness present. A glass of water on the coffee table suddenly shattered with a violent pop, sending shards flying across the room. A framed picture of Alex and Maya on the wall crashed to the floor, the glass broken. The scent of jasmine filled the air, thick and cloying. Maya, crying and terrified, begged Alex to take her home. As she left, she told him she would not come back to his apartment again. She said there was something deeply wrong, something evil in his home. Alex was finally, truly terrified, alone in his apartment that night. The full force of the entity's presence seemed to focus on him. He heard whispers, faint and sibilant, just at the edge of his hearing. They seemed to come from all directions at once. He huddled on his couch, a lamp on, trying to read, but unable to focus. In his peripheral vision, he saw the shadow of the old woman again, this time not just for a fleeting moment. It stood in the doorway of his bedroom, a solid black shape against the light, watching him with an air of ancient malevolence. Desperate, Alex began to research the box's origins, diving deep into Jewish mysticism and folklore about the Dybbuk. He learned that they were spirits that clung to the living, feeding off their energy and their fear. He read that they were often trapped in boxes or containers through complex rituals, and that to open such a container was to unleash the entity fully into the world. A horrifying thought began to form in his mind. Perhaps the entity was tormenting him because it wanted to be let out. Perhaps opening the box was the only way to confront it and make it stop. Driven by a combination of terror and a foolish, desperate hope, he made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He took the Dybbuk box down from the shelf. His hands trembled as he held it. The wood felt unnaturally cold, almost vibrating with a low, contained energy. He found a small screwdriver and a hammer, determined to pry it open. As he inserted the tip of the screwdriver into the seam between the lid and the box, a low, guttural whisper echoed through the room. A single, clear word that seemed to form directly inside his mind. No. He ignored the warning, his fear now mixed with a surge of adrenaline. He hammered the back of the screwdriver, and the old wood splintered. With a final crack, the seal broke and the lid popped open. For a moment, nothing happened. The room was silent. He peered inside. The box contained a strange assortment of items. 2 locks of hair from the 1920s, one blonde, one brunette, bound together with a string. A small granite slab engraved with the Hebrew word shalom. A dried rosebud, a single wine goblet, and a small cast iron candlestick holder. The instant he removed the items, the atmosphere in the apartment changed. It was as if a pressure valve had been released. The air became thick and heavy, and the temperature plummeted until he could see his own breath. The whispers that were at the edge of his hearing were now a cacophony of enraged, overlapping voices. The shadow figure in the doorway solidified. no longer just a silhouette, but a semi-transparent, shimmering form of the hag from his nightmares, her black eyes burning with a hateful fire. The entity was free. A wave of invisible force slammed into him, throwing him back against the wall. The lights in the apartment exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the room into darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow from the street outside. Every cabinet, every drawer, every door in the apartment flew open with a deafening crash. Objects were lifted into the air and hurled across the room. Books, dishes, picture frames, creating a whirlwind of chaos and destruction around him. Alex lay on the floor, paralyzed with a fear so absolute it felt like a physical weight crushing his chest. The hag-like apparition drifted towards him, its feet not touching the ground. It loomed over him, and he felt an icy, skeletal hand grip his throat, squeezing the air from his lungs. It didn't speak with a voice, but with images and feelings that flooded his mind. Centuries of pain, rage, loss, and a bottomless, insatiable hunger for life. He saw flashes of a war-torn village in Poland, a desperate seance, and a terrible binding ritual. This was not a human soul. It was something older, something that had never truly been human, only trapped by one. As his vision began to fade from lack of oxygen, a single thought pierced through his terror. The box was a prison. The only way to stop this was to put the prisoner back in its cell. With the last of his strength, he scrambled across the floor, grabbing the scattered contents and shoving them back into the wooden cabinet. The granite slab, the hair, the goblet, he threw them all in, his hands shaking violently. The apparition shrieked, a soundless, psychic scream that vibrated in his very bones. It lunged for him, its spectral form dissolving and reforming. Alex grabbed the lid and, with a final, desperate shove, slammed it shut. The moment the lid closed, there was a deafening silence. The whirlwind of objects crashed to the floor. The crushing pressure vanished. The air returned to normal. The room was still. The only sound his own ragged, desperate gasps for breath in the darkness. He sat there for hours amidst the wreckage of his apartment, not daring to move, his eyes fixed on the small, dark box on the floor. He had survived, but the entity wasn't gone. He could still feel it. A coiled, hateful energy now contained once more within the wood. He knew with absolute certainty that he could not keep the box. It was a conduit of pure evil, and he had been a fool to ever bring it into his home. His blog, his historical curiosity, it all seemed so trivial, so naive, in the face of what he had just experienced. The next day, he tried to get rid of it. First, he tried to burn it. He took the box to a deserted field, doused it in lighter fluid, and set it ablaze. The flames licked at the wood, but after the fluid burned away, the box was left completely untouched, not even scorched. Next, he tried to smash it. He struck it repeatedly with a sledgehammer, but the hammer simply bounced off, the impacts making a dull, unnatural thud. The box was indestructible. He couldn't destroy it. He couldn't bury it. He felt a cold dread creep over him as he realized what he had to do. He was trapped in the same cycle as Kevin Manny's. The only way to be free of the curse was to pass it on to someone else. The guilt was immense, a heavy, sickening weight in his stomach. But the fear was stronger, the memory of that icy hand on his throat, the psychic scream of the entity. It was a terror he could not live with. Self-preservation, raw and primal, won out over his conscience. He took the box home, cleaned it up as best he could, and logged back onto his computer. With trembling fingers, he created a new eBay listing. He looked at the original auction he had won and copied the description almost word for word. He wrote of the box's history, the strange contents, the warnings from the previous owner. He detailed the nightmares, the smells, the shadow figures. He wrote it not as a story, but as a dire, desperate warning. He hoped it would scare people away. But a dark part of him knew that, just like him, someone would see it as a challenge, a story, a thrill. He started the bidding at $1. The auction ended in 7 days. It was purchased by a man in another state, a collector of what he called anomalous artifacts. Alex packed the box carefully, a cold feeling of dread and finality washing over him. As he taped the shipping label to the package, he felt as though he were sealing someone else's tomb. He dropped it off at the post office and walked away without looking back. That night, for the first time in weeks, he slept through the night. There were no nightmares. The smell of jasmine was gone. The silence in his apartment was, for the first time, peaceful. For a year, Alex's life returned to normal. He moved to a new apartment, finished his degree, and shut down his blog, never wanting to think about haunted objects again. He tried to convince himself that it was all a strange, stress-induced, psychotic episode. He tried to forget the hag, the whispers, the box. He was almost successful. He almost believed he was free. But the universe has a cruel way of reminding you that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. One night, while idly browsing a paranormal forum online, a thread title caught his eye. "Help. My family is being haunted by an antique wine box." His heart stopped. He clicked the link, his hands suddenly cold and clammy. The post was by a man whose family was experiencing a series of terrifying events. He wrote of his children having the same recurring nightmare of an old hag. He wrote of an inexplicable smell of jasmine flowers. He wrote of seeing shadow figures and hearing whispers. It all started, he said, a week after he bought a strange antique off eBay. The man had posted a picture of the object. Alex felt the breath leave his body. There on the screen was the Dybbuk Box. It was sitting on a family's fireplace mantel, looking small and innocent. A silent wooden cancer that he had willingly sent to them. The man was begging for help for answers, for a way to make it stop. The comments section was filled with theories and advice. But Alex knew none of it would work. He knew there was only one solution, the same one he had resorted to. He had not ended the curse. He had merely become a chapter in its history. He was another link in the chain, passing the misery from one unsuspecting soul to the next. The relief he had felt was a lie, bought at the price of another family's terror. He closed his laptop, but he couldn't close out the image of the box in that family's home. The guilt he had suppressed for a year came rushing back, suffocating him. He realized the entity was still attached to him, not by its presence, but by the knowledge of what he had done. The story of the Dybbuk Box did not end with Alex, and it did not end with the family who bought it from him. It continues to circulate, both the box itself and the legend surrounding it. It has passed through the hands of several more owners, including a museum curator who tried to study it, only to be plagued by health problems, and a terrifying infestation of insects in his home. Each new owner experiences the same escalating horror, the same nightmares, the same oppressive presence. Each one, in the end, is forced to pass it on. The box is still out there somewhere. Perhaps it is sitting in another museum. Or perhaps it is packed away in a shipping container, traveling to its next unsuspecting victim. It is a perpetual motion machine of fear, a vessel of darkness that cannot be contained or destroyed, only passed from one hand to the next. It is a testament to the fact that some stories are real, and some relics are not meant to be owned. They are prisons, and the warden's only relief is to hand the keys to someone else. So the next time you are scrolling through online auctions, past the vintage furniture and forgotten trinkets, and you see a listing that sounds too strange to be true, a story that feels more like a warning than a sales pitch, you might be tempted to place a bid. You might think of it as just a story, a conversation piece. But ask yourself this: are you bidding on an object? Or are you bidding for the chance to become the next chapter in a never-ending nightmare? Because some things, once bought, can never truly be returned.